Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor, and today I have Charles Coulombe back with me. How you doing, Charles?
Oh, well, I had a touch of the Irish and then a bit of the Scotch and some of the English as well, to tell you the truth, over the past 2 weeks. The
I can
brogue, the burr, and the received pronunciation.
I can understand the latter better.
Well, I'm afraid you'll have to live with my drawl or whatever it is I use normally.
Well, Charles Coulombe is a author, historian. Is I think it's still your latest book is the Blessed Charles
Sure
book. So
is.
link in the description for that. If you haven't bought it, go buy it. Um, Matthew is saying yes, two of my faves. Which very appreciate that compliment. Unworthy of it as I am, but Charles is very worthy of it.
Uh, I think not.
So
But no,
as sorry,
go ahead.
go on.
No, it's your
Okay.
show. You're the host. You're the boss man.
Charles, as he said, was in England, Ireland, and Scotland, the three kingdoms, recently. And we're going to talk about the two referendums that happened in Ireland March 8th. Charles, did you make it to Wales at all?
Sadly, no. And the Principality is a place I really want to explore. The only time I was ever in Wales was in September of 2022. I went to Cardiff very briefly, but nevertheless was able to see the really wonderful oratory at Cardiff, the Church of St. Alban on the Moors, which happens to have a really beautiful shrine to St. Alban, the proto-martyr of Britain. And from there, I went to Caerleon. It looks like Caerleon, but the people there pronounce it Caerleon, which was one of King Arthur's haunts and is filled with all kinds of Arthurian and Welsh legends and the birthplace of the late great Arthur Machen. So I've only been the one day in Wales, but I got a real dose of Welshness.
Okay.
And as it happens, today I've got to crank out an article on Saunders Lewis, who was the great Catholic Welsh nationalist of the 20th century. So,
A Catholic Welsh nationalist.
yeah.
Was he just like a Welsh nationalist who happened to be Catholic, or was there a real or did he have to be all three at a time?
Oh, no, these were very, very closely connected with him.
Okay.
Lewis, like Harry Edwards and other people, the same mindset, basically saw the fall. Well, they were very much influenced by Belloc and Chesterton, actually. And their vision for Wales was very distributist and so on. The thing was that they saw the beginning of Wales' fall with Henry VIII. Because prior to that time, as Saunders Lewis wrote a lot, in medieval Christendom, the ideas of independence and nationalism made no sense. There was basically a mixed commonwealth from Portugal to Russia of varying polities of sizes and so on, with various languages, and our whole language of independence and nationalism didn't exist. But then comes the Protestant Revolt. Henry VIII basically cuts England and Scotland and Ireland to the degree that he could off from the rest of Europe and takes them, into cloud cuckoo land, as it were. Wales.
Things are just getting more kooky in kooky.
Yeah. And then Wales, of course, decatholicization was met hand in hand with Anglicization, which she was very much against. As with the Highlands of Scotland and the Gaeltacht in Ireland, Wales was primarily royalist in the Civil Wars, and then had a very strong Jacobite tradition, and all for the same reason, same as Cornwall. It was a Celtic thing. Anyway, his idea was a Welsh-speaking Wales with a more or less Catholic economy. He was a very strong monarchist, but very much opposed to Parliament in Westminster and the government in Whitehall, all of which again makes sense if you think of Chesterton and Belloc, only specifically applied to Wales. And that was his Welsh nationalism, which is why, although he was a co-founder of the current Plaid Cymru, however you pronounce it, the Welsh Nationalist Party, he came to dislike it intensely, just as he was very much in favor of the European Union in the beginning, when it seemed like under people like Schumann and Adenauer and all that, revival of some sort of Catholic Europe. And he was an opponent of the new Mass in English and a friend of the Tridentine Mass. He begged unsuccessfully to have a Tridentine requiem at his death, but as is so often the case, he was given great pastoral care and guidance, and drop kicked into the sewer, as everyone is who needs pastoral guidance.
The famous pastoral guidance.
Yeah, well, unless you got a lot of dough, which he didn't have. But if you got a lot of dough, you can usually buy pastoral care.
Okay.
Best pastoral care money can buy. Ask the Kennedys.
Indeed. So March 8th, there was the referendums, and the first referendum was called the family referendum. And I just want to go through sort of the original text, which is now still the current text, because both referendums failed disastrously for the parties that supported it, which was pretty much everybody, as well as
I feel so bad for them.
And
so sad.
The polling also showed that they were supposed to win, but they lost incredibly to this. The first one they lost 67% to 32%, and then the second one they lost 73% to 26%, and I believe all the constituencies or all voted against the referendums. So the original text that they wanted to change was: the state recognizes the family as the natural primary and fundamental unit of society, and as a moral institution possessing inalienable and imprescriptible rights, antecedent and superior to all positive law. And they wanted to change that to: the state recognizes the family, whether found on marriage or on other durable relationships, as the natural primary fundamental unit group of society, and as a moral institution possessing inalienable and imprescriptible rights, antecedent and superior to all positive law. So they sort of take the same format, but they add whether founded on marriage or on a durable relationship. Now, Charles, what is a durable relationship?
Well, it's whatever you need it to be. It's whatever you want it to be. It's a one-night stand that never ends. Who knows? I mean, and it's you, your boyfriend, your chihuahua, his aunt, anything you like. Why not? Let it all hang out.
I mean,
break down all the barriers.
Isn't one of the most durable relationships between man and beast?
Well, indeed it is. I'll tell you, I have loved certain dogs and certain cats far more than I have almost anyone I've ever voted for.
Oh, wait. What about the voters and the prime minister? Is that a durable relationship?
As long as he's still eating up at the trough. Well, remember the relationship of the Taoiseach to or any prime minister to the country is that of the chief boar in a flock of pigs at the trough. He pushes everyone out of the way, eats as much as he can, and the others get what they want. No, I hate to use these vulgar synonyms. The truth of the matter is, to be brutally frank, the Taoiseach himself is sadly part of a very unusual relationship, and certainly not a marriageable one. And well, I mean, it's the way it is, you know. Oh, and by the way, this was not imposed by the British. For those worried, they didn't march into Dublin Castle and stick this guy on the throne. That didn't happen. That's not what happened. This guy was elected, oddly enough. But to make it better, he's one of the conservatives, the Fine Gael, not one of those radical Fianna Fáil men.
The gay conservatives.
At least he is. But at least Sinn Féin, who helped the Crown bring an abortion into Ulster, at least Sinn Féin were also for it.
Was any political party with like actual representatives opposed?
No major party. And I mean, basically, you know, people have pointed out these two referenda, which is the proper term, by the way. It's referenda, just so you know. Referendum is a neologism that your university professors are trying to push because they don't know any Latin, but never mind. Referenda. They expected, because of the enormous way in which abortion and gay marriage were brought into Ireland, that they would have the same happy jaunt to this thing. But you see, they made a major mistake. The Irish have lost their faith, but they haven't lost their minds, as the old French joke has it. And that being the case, there was no way that they, at this stage, now I have to say at this stage, because one of the things you'll see with the successive Irish governments and their subjects in Ireland is that if you keep throwing referenda at the people, eventually you will get what you want. They had to do that with divorce. Because of the problems with the church, because of the collapse of both the hierarchy and the faith in Ireland, they were able to win two referenda quickly and easily on the basis of painting it as smacking the church around. This here and now, it's going to take more work. They're going to have to. I mean, look. They've got all the parties on side, all the major media on side, the university on side. Sooner or later, I have no doubt they'll be able to smack their subjects into, or woo them into going along with the deal. And if things continue as they are, then sooner or later they'll get the results they want. And once they have those, it'll become the sacred law of the land, protected by the majesty of the Irish Constitution. Now, see, the irony, too, with that first referendum text you read, trying to amend it is in itself a violation of the amendment. Read that again. Read the current version again.
The state recognizes the family as the natural, primary, and fundamental unit group of society, and as a moral institution possessing inalienable and imprescriptible rights, antecedent and superior to all positive law.
Which means that in and of itself, it's not something for the creatures that haunt Leinster House or the bizarre figures lurking in the government buildings. Not even the Taoiseach himself, His Excellency, enthroned in all his glory. It's not something that the little ones can play with. Bad touch. Little ones have to go find something else, like continuing to milk the public cow, rather than playing with the definition of marriage, of a family, rather.
Yeah. So clarification, there were two very minor parties that opposed it. But they have a total of 4 members representing the Independent Party and the Aon-2 Party. Thanks, John, not real name. And yes, so I mean, of course, they didn't really have any real power to affect anything. So practically, they didn't have any. There wasn't really any representation for the backlash that happened. Now, there was a second part of the family family one that they wanted to change. So the original text is: the state pledges itself to guard with special care the institution of marriage on which the family is founded and to protect it against attack. And then they wanted to change it to: the state pledges itself to guard with special care the institution of marriage and to protect it against attack. So basically saying that family, they wanted to cut out the fact that family is what marriage is founded upon, basically, which is a really weird. So basically, marriage is what we say it is, and that means there's nothing more to marriage. It's not really a family necessarily.
No, they separate marriage and family. Family is any voluntary group of people, and marriage is a different voluntary group of people, not necessarily connected.
Yes.
It doesn't really matter anyway because they're all wards of the state.
What were people talking about when you were over there in Ireland? What was the reaction? Was there any specific reaction to this specific amendment? Because this was the one that was voted upon and got the most support, which isn't saying a lot, but there was like 5% or so voted yes.
Well,
5. Yeah.
Again, these were seen. It's a very, very different context from a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The church didn't say anything about anything in this deal, and the proponents of it did not, and in a certain sense, couldn't present them as an attack on the church. And with that out of it, it simply became a question, and it was perceived as the parasites in Dublin and their servants trying to impose this on the rest of the country, which in other countries, in other ways, referenda, I mean, if you think of Brexit, if you think of various recent elections in different countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, if you even look, although I hate to go back into ancient history, I don't have to. You look very recently at the referendum in Australia on the voice. These things now are turning not into a referendum necessarily on even just on the thing itself, but a vote on the oligarchy that runs the West, the local oligarchy in each country. And the message is that a big part of the subjects don't like what their masters are peddling.
Do you see these local oligarchies as below the sort of masters of the United States of America, as being subservient to the American government?
To a great degree, although I mean it's not like they get every single marching order from Washington. It's not that simple. But it's I mean the United States of America remain the most powerful nation in the world. Rule the United States and you rule the world effectively. Not China, to a great degree, not Russia, not Iran. But none of those are necessarily places you'd want to live in either. Yeah. You know, my late father had a wonderful saying about people like Al Capone and Legs Diamond. He used to say, rival gangs, same racket.
Indeed. But and then we have the third or sorry, not third, the second of the referenda. We have the Care Amendment, which is just, I think it's hilarious that it's called the Care Amendment. It just sounds very silly. So the article proposed to delete two things from the Care with the Care Amendment. The first is, in particular, the state recognizes that by her life within the home, woman gives to the state a support without which the common good cannot be achieved, and the state shall therefore endeavor to ensure that mothers shall not be obliged by economic necessity to engage in labor to the neglect of their duties in the home. And it wanted to be sort of replaced with, the state recognizes that the provision of care by members of a family to one another by reason of the bonds that exist among them gives to society a support without which the common good cannot be achieved, and shall strive to support such provision. Now, the second part, the thing they wanted to replace it with just sounds like gobbledygook to me.
Well, it sounds like gobbledygook to you because you're not a moron.
What is it trying to say there?
Well, what it's really trying to say is that motherhood is not just for mothers, and motherhood is not just for women. And we don't believe in traditional gender roles. If we did believe in traditional gender roles, then we would have a Taoiseach who was, I don't know, not what our Taoiseach is or was. He's left office now. We'll all miss him.
Well, he's still temporarily still there, right? Until there's a new one, right?
Yeah, I suppose he is. A bit like the tar baby. Can't get off. You can't get away from him. Go away. Go away. It's interesting that the British Prime Minister, the Scots Chief Minister, or First Minister, whatever they call him, and the Irish Taoiseach are all descendants of the subcontinent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, echoes of the Raj.
The Raj has returned to part of the empire that was no longer part of the empire, that tried to flee.
You might say the chickens have come home to Raj. But no, I mean, these people, what can I say? As Robert Donat said in some war movie that I don't remember, where do we get such men? And my addendum would be, why can't we send them back? And I don't just mean the Taoiseach and the two ministers. I mean the whole bloody elite.
Yes.
I mean, you stop and look at the world today. You look at Macron. You look at our own Nehammer here in Vienna. You look at this traitor in Spain. This incredible traitor. He gets office by pardoning people who plotted against the government. That's how he becomes prime minister. You look at our own senile president and Madame Pompadour, the vice president. What do you say? Yeah, I know what you say. Okay, boomer. Thanks.
Are you alleging a relationship between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris?
No, by no means. That was her former job. That was how she got to start in politics. No, you knew that.
Yeah.
You knew that. That was how she got to start. She was the longtime mistress of Willie Brown, former Speaker of the House in California. And when he was term limited out to San Francisco, she became sort of his main squeeze, but he was still married, so it was okay. At any rate, I mean, very publicly, I'm not repeating gossip. She was always on his arm. But he retired her for a younger model and got her as a consolation prize, Attorney General of California. And that was a nice job. And then she was able to parlay that into a run for the presidency, which turned into being VP.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, she got in there.
He's, as he and President Hindenburg in Germany have proved, dementia is no limit to public service.
Well,
I think that's important.
Well, Charles, we actually it was only a couple hours ago actually that Ireland received its new Taoiseach.
Oh, who's the new? Okay, out of the way, pigs. There's a new porker at the trough. Who we got?
Simon Harris, the youngest ever Irish prime minister.
He's probably 12.
37.
Like our own, like the idiot we had here in Austria a little while ago. Simon Harris, the Taoiseach. Oh gosh, he looks pretty kid-like.
He wants to bring new empathy.
What's wrong with the old empathy?
I don't know. He seems very pro-Palestinian. Interesting.
Well, let's see. He's leader of Fine Gael. Personal life. Here we go. Oh, he's married. Thank God for that.
To a woman?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
married.
I guess that's an up. Yeah.
He's got Crohn's disease.
Why do we know that?
That's what it says. It's what it says in Wikipedia. Source of all truth. I'm just going by what all I know is what the Wikipedia tell me.
The Wikipedia.
That's right. I just go with Wikipedia.
No longer your knee or your hip. Your Wikipedia.
No, that's right. That's right. His brother is autistic, so he knows about autism.
So he might not want to murder them all.
Well, he's big on TikTok. So they call him the TikTok Taoiseach.
Oh, my.
Oh, this sounds great. Yeah, I think we're in for a good time.
I mean, I assume he's just pretty liberal, right? Standard liberal, or is he?
Well, he says he's got to be a Taoiseach for all. And whenever anybody says he's something for everybody, he's usually something for nobody.
Yeah. He's worried about the far right, it looks.
Oh, of course, the far right, the far right. Ireland trembles on the verge of something or other.
Something or other?
Well, if he's really worried about the far right, he's supported the legalization of abortion in Ireland. Good.
But
he loves it. I wonder. So he's not the Taoiseach of the unborn.
Wait, he supports abortion?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're lucky for him. His parents didn't.
Yeah. Well, and lucky for his brother's autistic too.
Yeah. So it's good to know. It's good to know he's a what do you call it? Free from coherence. Free from coherence.
Well, that's because he has empathy.
Yeah, it's a new empathy, which is like the old disdain.
He also called his he wants to bring a reset of some kind.
Oh, I'm sure he does. He should begin with his own head. All right. Well, anyway, in the immortal words of that great band so beloved of my fellow boomers, The Who, new boss same as the old boss.
Indeed. Not much has changed.
The beat goes on. Da, 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 and the beat goes on. You see, you can vote as much as you like. And nothing will change.
Well, there's going to be an election. I agree with that, but there will be an election, I think, in like 12 months or something.
Well, so basically they'll be able to vote either in favor of a party that was in favor of the referendum, of the things that were voted down, or else for a party that was in favor of them.
Basically, I mean, unless there's
I see.
Unless miraculously a third, or not even, it's not a third party, of course. That's American lingo. What do they call really outside parties?
Minor
Yeah, okay.
parties.
Unless a
But
minor party comes out of nowhere.
you have good luck. But this is great. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, we are an echo, not a voice. That's really what you ought to say. I mean, how are Fine Gael and the Fianna Fáil any different today from each other? You know what their origins lie in, don't you? Or do you?
Say that again?
Do you know where the two major parties originated in Ireland?
Isn't one of them is from oh gosh, what Eamon Valera, right?
Yeah, that's the Fianna Fáil.
Yeah. What's the other one?
Well, the Fine Gael, basically, as you may recall, there was a big fight for independence in Ireland, starting vaguely in 1916 with the famous Dublin Rising, and then going on and on and on up until 1922. Well, 1921, 1922, the rebels who were led since the demise of most of the early leaders in 1916, the rebels were led by two men, Dev, as Devile Era was nicknamed, and Michael Collins, who was the military commander in particular, the big fella. And basically, they were offered a deal by the British government, independence for Southern Ireland, that is to say, for everything that isn't the 6 counties of Ulster, as a dominion like Canada. Mm-hmm. So they would remain part of the Commonwealth. The king would be the King of Ireland, but the way he is the King of Canada, the King of Australia, etc. So the rebels split. The majority accepted it, and they were called the Treatyites. They were led by Michael Collins. The minority opposed it. They were the anti-Treatyites, and they were led by Dev. So the result, the treaty was signed in 22. The Irish Free State came into existence. And the Irish Civil War broke out. It was horrible, very, very nasty. 2 terrible years between treaty and anti-treaty forces. In the end, the IRA were defeated. The Irish Free State was established, and the Fine Gael represented basically the pro-treaty forces, and the Fianna Fáil represented the anti-treaty forces. So that was that's where they come from. Now, what's funny to me is that if Dev and Michael Collins at the end of it hated each other, and of course there's a question as to how connected, if at all, Dev was with Michael Collins' murder. Mm-hmm. But this I can promise you: if you could resurrect them both from the dead and bring the creatures before them for judgment that reign in their name today, I can tell you it would not be a pretty sight. Not pretty at all.
Yeah.
Again, you will find very few conservative, Christian, Democratic, even liberal parties in the world today, including in our own country, to say nothing of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Italy, anywhere you want to look, Spain, Portugal. You find very few whose founders would not collapse into vomiting to see what the creatures that call themselves with those party names today would think. I mean, and that's even true of our own Republican and Democratic parties. If they could see what all their effort turned into, there'd be a whole lot of dead politicians lying around. If said returnees were able to, physically do harm on the living. Fortunately, that's not the case. So the living live and continue to run the trough for their own benefit.
What were the major ideological differences between Collins and Eamon de Valera? Were they Were they much different except for this one issue that led to the Civil War, or did they have many other disagreements?
Well, they had, but this disagreement was a major disagreement because basically Devile Era and his sort wanted an Ireland that would include all 32 counties. It would be an independent republic, completely separate from Britain, no connection whatsoever.
He got that eventually.
Well, no, Ulster is still part of the UK.
Oh, yes, that's a good point. He got the South, I guess, fully independent.
Well, for whatever that's worth now.
So, well, yeah, I mean, independence is very I don't know. It's just on paper mostly, anyways.
Well, it's funny. Saunders Lewis, who I mentioned earlier, I was reading some of his stuff, his commentary on the Irish situation, and he said one of his big things is the preservation of the Welsh language. And today, I think something like 35% of the Welsh speak Welsh, which is a lot more than the percentage of the Irish who speak Irish. So he actually questioned whether really independent Ireland was even possible, since so few people spoke their native language. How long is that really a country? Was Lewis's question. And he said that political independence wasn't nearly as necessary as cultural independence. Although he did want political independence from the politicians in Whitehall. At any rate, there were several things involved here. One was that the Ulster, whether you like them or not, the Ulster Scots are real people and they actually live, and they're like there and stuff. unless ethnic cleansing is your idea of a good time, that was an issue that had to be resolved. Well, how do you resolve that? The Ulster Scots were absolutely convinced that they could not live peacefully or happily under an evil Catholic leadership. Home rule is Rome rule, was the statement. So for the treatyites, their idea was that if the treaty was scrupulously adhered to—
What is it again? Say it again.
Home rule is Rome rule. Yeah. So the idea of the treatyites was that if the Irish Free Staters scrupulously adhered to the treaty, in time it would become obvious to the Ulster Scots that they could have a safe home in a united Ireland. But if the treaty were broken, and the treaty included the Constitution of the Irish Free State, if that were to happen, then the Ulster Scots would become irreconcilable and a peaceful union of Ireland impossible. And of course, remember, a military solution, a takeover of the North by the South, what would that give you? It would give you a ton of disaffected Ulster Scots who would either carry on an endless guerrilla war of their own, or you'd have to throw them all out. And what would that do? What would that put your moral place as a paragon of Christian virtue, which was something people worried about in those days, having Christian virtue. Fortunately, we're past all that now. As these referenda show, we're past any kind of sense of decency at all, and I'm sure it's a good thing. But moving along, so what happened was that the first few years of the Irish Free State, from 1924 to 1932, the Fine Gael ruled the country. The Fianna Fáil refused to take their seats in Parliament because to do so they had to swear allegiance to the king, the way you do in any Dominion Parliament, and they refused to do that. So for the first few years, you had a Governor General who, both of them Catholic. The first, Timothy Healy, was a well-known Irish nationalist figure throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. He retired and was replaced by a man named James McNeill, who was a Catholic from Ulster. And even that should give you kind of an idea as to why he was appointed. Because as a Catholic from Ulster, he knew the Ulstermen. And the idea was very much in the minds of the Fine Gael to conciliate the North and bring them into union peacefully. But in 1932, Devile Era received a revelation from heaven. No, he didn't. But he did decide that his conscience would allow him and his party to take the oath if it would allow them to take over the country.
Okay. How'd they get that? How did they did they get voted in as a majority and then they were like, okay, fine.
Exactly.
We'll do it.
And then suddenly Devile Era realized that it was a good and conscionable thing for him to do, as long as it meant there was power involved.
So he took the oath. Did he keep to his oath?
Well, that's a good question. And the answer is yes and no. And I'll explain what I mean by that. He immediately began putting pressure on the Governor General. Now, the Governor General, James McNeill, had wanted to conciliate Devile Era any way he could. So instead of having him come out to Phoenix Park, which is where the Governor General's house is, now the president's residence, he went and gave him the instruments of office at his own office in the government buildings. He did everything he could, to cater to him. But then one day he was at a party. He went to a party at the French legation. There were two of Devile Era's government ministers there, cabinet ministers. They saw him, and then they left. And so the Governor General, McNeill, wrote Devile Era and said, what was that about? And the response was, it's this government's policies that none of our ministers will be present at any functions that you're at.
Okay.
And then, if that wasn't amusing enough, Devile Era got McNeill disinvited to the 1932 Eucharistic conference in Dublin. Now, both as Governor General and as a Catholic, this was a huge offense to McNeill. So McNeill demanded that Devile Era apologize publicly. Devile Era refused. So McNeill wrote Dev and he said, I'll tell you what, if you don't apologize, I'm going to publish all our correspondence. And the public can see for themselves how petty you are. How about that? And Devile Era said, don't you dare. Our communications are privileged and private. And he said, nope. And he published them. Well, Devile Era was furious, absolutely furious. And he demanded that McNeill resign. And McNeill laughingly said, no. If you want to get rid of me, you have to ask your king to pull my commission. And Devile Era did just that.
That's kind of funny.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous, but it shows you how Devile Era, I don't want him to sound too stupid by any means. He was not a stupid man, and he, although whenever I've gotten into conversations about him in Ireland, I've always had to pull rank on everyone. Because inevitably someone will say, well, who's it to you anyway? You're a foreigner. Yeah, that's right. And I'm the only one in the room who can talk about Devile Era because he, like myself, was a New Yorker. I can talk about him. You can't. So, well, I mean, it's a stupid line of reasoning, but it's a stupid assault in the first place. So,
yeah.
I've always found that if I give you a dumb argument, you're under no responsibility to give me a dumb response, to give me a smart response. In other words, your rebuttal could be as idiotic as my first assault.
Indeed.
I say, you don't like Mexican food because you got a beard. Have at it. Whatever comes to mind, just throw it at me.
So the governor
Anyway,
was the governor general dismissed?
he was indeed, and replaced, because remember the way it works in the British system after the Statute of Westminster in 31. Governors general, like in Canada, Australia, etc., who represent the king, are not appointed by the king in terms of his own decision. In days gone by, they were appointed on the advice of the British government. But after 1931, they were and are appointed on the advice of the local government.
Oh.
So in other words, the chick who just became Governor General of Canada was appointed on the advice of Justin Trudeau.
Ugh. Why would anyone want to? That sounds just terrible.
Well, politics can be a sleazy business. Swim in the sewer, use a lot of deodorant. Anyway.
Can the next party that takes over Canada, can they basically ask for the person to be dismissed as well and redo it?
They can. Now, usually they don't. Usually it's kind of a courtesy thing. But the problem, I mean, this is a whole other issue, the vice-regal office. Originally, and really up until Queen Elizabeth came in, governors general were either royals themselves or they were famous military people, usually apolitical figures. But in a lot of countries, it's a government house, which is the usual name for the. They have other names in a few places, but most of them are called government houses. Government houses become a sort of retirement home for out-of-the-way politicians. And sometimes it's actually used to get rid of a political rival. So, because you see, the governor general can't really make any political moves or anything. So, anyway, what should happen? But the new one, Donald Buckley, basically closed down Viceregal Lodge. He gave the seals and everything of approval to Devile Era, and he went fishing. And he spent most of his time fishing. He didn't do much of anything. Now, that was in 1934. 2 years later, something very exciting happened. And that was the abdication of Edward VIII.
His oath was sort of undone.
Well,
okay. Nope.
It's a little more complex than that.
I assume part of the oath was, I guess, to the heirs or successors.
Yes, of course. Okay, so. But you'll see. Okay. It's a fun story. It's one of my favorites, actually. And not, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just a question of picking on Dev. I like it whenever any politician runs on their own sword. I have to admit it. What happened was that Edward VIII, you see, remember, and this is something that requires, again, a little understanding, and explains why the governors general chose the way they are. Because of the Statute of Westminster in 1931, the Dominions, which in those days were Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Newfoundland, which is a separate Dominion, believe it or not, and the Irish Free State.
Which one's Newfoundland?
Newfoundland.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking Newfoundland, like Finland, but new.
Yeah, Newfoundland. It's off the coast of Colombia. You'll see it in the atlas near the Federated States of El Dorado. But anyway, it's close to the Mauritanian coast. You can see it all there. But seriously, each of the dominions were now independent nations. And when Edward VIII abdicated, each of the dominions, in order for that abdication to take effect, each of the parliaments of those dominions had to pass it, had to accept it, had to make it a law. In other words, when he abdicated as king of Great Britain, The British Parliament had to accept it for it to be effective in Britain, Australia, New Zealand, etc., etc., etc. Well, when he abdicated, Devile Era rushed through a ton of legislation. He abolished the role of Governor General, divvied up its duties amongst various other offices, and he basically removed the monarchy from the internal constitution of the country. He then passed something called the External Relations Act, which declared that George VI was the person responsible for the foreign affairs, external relations of the Irish Free State, of Ireland. He did all that.
Wait, so George VI is still in charge?
Well, here's the little problem. The one thing he didn't get around to was having the Dáil accept the abdication of Edward VIII.
So Edward VIII is still the king.
Well, legally, no, nobody picked up on that at the time because everybody was busy doing other stuff and recoiling to all of this amazing going on, and people just presumed. But Edward VIII's abdication was never accepted, and the monarchy was never explicitly abolished. So, what did happen, however, and this was even funnier, 1939 comes along, 3 years later. The king of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland goes to war. His Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, and South African governments all declare war. The government of Ireland, which had just in 1937 imposed a new internally Republican constitution, but which still had him signing all the letters of credence for Irish ambassadors and all ambassadors to Ireland being accredited to George VI. Well, he was neutral as King of Ireland, even though his brother was still king, but nobody really picked up on that. And so, all during World War II, what's that?
Don't you love legal mumbo jumbo?
Oh, it's not mumbo jumbo. It's what gives lawyers and politicians a life. So what should happen? And judges, can't forget them. Mm-hmm. So basically, from 1939 to 1945, all of Ireland's ambassadors to Germany, Italy, and Japan were accredited in the name of King George VI. And the Italian, German, and Japanese ambassadors to Dublin were all accredited to King George VI in his role as King of Ireland.
Did he know that?
Oh, yeah, he had to sign them.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if it was more like like somebody else signed it.
No.
So he knew that.
No. He knew it. And believe me, this kind of unusual situation did come up a few times in the debates in the Irish Parliament. And basically the question was, who is the head of state? The king or the president of Ireland? Well, in 1948, Devile Era was defeated at last after so many years in power by the Fine Gael, which were run by a man named Michael Costello.
That just sounds like a joke, but yes.
No, it's no relation to the award-winning comedian.
Is that Irish?
Yeah, it sounds Italian, but it's Irish.
Really? Costello?
Yep.
That's weird.
So, Costello is in Canada, in Ottawa. He's at a state dinner, and I don't remember the specifics, but somehow or other, he got annoyed at the way the toasts were done. And so he resolved that Ireland was going to become, once and for all, a full republic. So he got home. First thing he did was get rid of the External Relations Act. Parliament knocks it down. So Ireland is no longer part of the Commonwealth, and the President of Ireland is indisputably, according to them, head of state.
Okay. So that's
again,
okay.
But again, there was no abolition of the monarchy.
But Edward VIII is still the king.
Well, until he died.
Well, wasn't there some sort of succession there?
Well, yeah, Elizabeth II.
Okay,
so she'd have been queen from 72 until she died.
So Charles III is the king.
King of Ireland.
Okay.
Now, mind you, by the Irish Constitution, he has no place, he has no role, he has nothing.
He's just a name.
Well, it's kind of like the power of the Irish voter. The Irish voter has as much control over his government as the king does. And he means as much to his government as King Charles does to the Irish government.
Very interesting.
What's wrong with that? Or for that matter, as much as we mean to our governments.
That's true. I mean, well, you talked about culture. You talked about the importance of culture and the fact that Irish people don't speak Irish really. And that it seems to me that one of the big difference would have just been the church at that point. Do you think that's
the church? I mean, this of course, one of the reasons Saunders Lewis opposed the English Mass was that he knew, and it did happen to a certain degree, that an English liturgy would inevitably prevail over a Welsh liturgy.
Wait, so I assume it does. Did it?
Yeah. I mean, remember that most Welsh Catholics are not Welsh speakers. And most Welsh speakers are, you ready for the name? Now they say Welsh Presbyterian, but they changed the name about 20 years ago. The original name was much better. Calvinistic Methodists.
Why?
Well, therein lies a good tale. Basically, the Church of England and Wales, the Anglican Church, became identified with the upper classes, with the Welsh gentry who had become very anglicized. And due to, I'm sorry to say, certain jealousies, you didn't have a Welsh college in Rome. You didn't have, if they had continued to produce Welsh-speaking priests the way they did Irish and Scots Gaelic-speaking priests, you'd have retained a lot more of the Welsh for the Catholic faith. And it was still heavily Catholic into the late 17th and early 18th century. But as in Cornwall, the failure of Welsh and I guess Cornish speaking Catholic priests, coupled with the disaffection, especially on a class basis, from Anglicanism, led to the rise of nonconformism. That is to say, Protestant sects that were not part of the established church, nor were they Catholic. And the Methodist revival spread through districts like that all over England and Wales and so on. And that was just an extraordinary experience. It was the beginning of revivals and things like that. That were, I mean, they became eventually, they would come to the American frontier. Because you've got the people who, on the one hand, were cut off from the sacraments, on the other hand, didn't have that much of an intellectual life. And in between that came revivalism. And that was how, deprived of either of those two things, their religiosity expressed itself. So you see, Calvinistic Methodism became the religion of the majority of Wales, the way Wesleyan Methodism, which was not Calvinist, became prevalent in Cornwall.
Gotcha. Now, do you back to sort of the Irish um, referenda? Do you think the Irish voters will continue to push back in these in any meaningful way uh, that they did with this referenda?
I wouldn't bet on it, but I certainly hope so. I
Do you have
mean,
any encouraging words for any Irish uh, people listen or watching?
sure, you bet I do. Pray to your patrons. You know, Our Lady of Knock, St. Patrick, St. Bridget, St. Columkill, and all the rest of them. When I was in Ireland, this recent trip, I was on the west coast of Ireland and had some really problematic difficulties I ran into all at once. And I went to one of St. Bridget's wells and I did all the required uh, praying around, 5 times clockwise around the cross and so forth that are done at that particular well. And an unexpected solution came within a day. Mary loves Ireland. Patrick loves Ireland. All the saints and scholars that live there love her. My family patron, St. Coulombe, who they call the first European, who was definitely Irish. He certainly loved
He's
Ireland.
your patron?
Yeah, the patron, Coulombe.
Oh.
We've always claimed St. Coulombe as our patron because he went really many years ago, back in the 1400s. The name was probably Colombo, which is a Genoese name, and one of them went to Paris, and eventually, well, you get the idea. Colombo became Coulombe, but having come to France from Ireland and England to the Surrey, St. Columban went on to Switzerland and finally ended up near Genoa in a town called Bobbio, where his relics are to this day. I have never yet been there, nor to the Surrey, but these are all places I want to go one day. But I mention it because, apart from being my family patron, he was a great blessing from Ireland to all the nations of Western Europe that he went through. Ireland was the island of saints and scholars. She still has in her everything she ever was. The deeds of Irish immigrants to bring the faith across the globe are legendary. And you can still see the remnants of that faith both before and after the penal times throughout the, for want of a better word, hibernosphere. So pray and work. If you know like-minded people, meet them, get to know your history, get to know your culture. I'll certainly never learn to speak Gaelic, but if you're Irish and you've got any means of doing so, learn the Gaelic. I mean, that's your heritage, I'm not against the English, God knows. The language is wonderful and even and useful in 1,000 ways. But the cultural struggle for the soul of Ireland is almost lost, seemingly, at the moment. And that's where it has to begin again. I think it's useful, the Irish revivalists, Irish Gaelic revivalists of the 19th century, looked at the then united completely to the UK, Ireland of their time, as occupied territory. And they looked at the ascendancy, as the Protestant nobility and gentry were called, that ran it, as the occupiers. Well, that idea certainly a lot of Irish in Ireland and abroad still see things through that prism. Well, to the degree that it was true, it's not true now. What is true is that you have a new ascendancy, a rainbow-colored one instead of a British one. And any way you could combat that ascendancy in life, being faithful to your religion, being faithful to your heritage, learning Gaelic if you can, and to the degree that you can win it as you can, use the ballot box. Sometimes it works. And pray, pray, pray that God sends Ireland the leaders she needs to free her from this ascendancy, to break that hideous strength in Ireland. For that matter, the rest of the world. You know, that the English pray to St. George, the Welsh to St. David, and the Irish to St. Andrew, and the French to Saint Denis, and the Spanish to Santiago, the Portuguese to San Miguel, the Swedes to St. Eric, the Norwegians to St. Olaf, the Americans to Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception. I mean, my heavens. Everybody pray to your patrons to get these people, just make them stop. Cut it out. Bad touch. Bad. And then, you know, in God's good time. I mean, the thing we have to remember, though, is that, you know, Ireland was the first country where the people brought in abortion and gay marriage. Everywhere else was through legislation or the judiciary. Subsequent to scrapping Roe v. Wade, a number of American states, including my own California, came rushing in to join the Irish in this bath of acid. As long as majorities can be gotten to vote for Hara, what can we expect? Nevertheless, we have to pray and work because we also know that history is made by determined minorities. 50 years ago, and I can tell you because I know and stuff. 50 years ago, what we see now would have been simply unthinkable. But small, determined minorities brought it about. Well, please God, in 50 years from now, small, determined minorities will have put it back.
Well said, Charles.
I won't be around to see it, but I pray God you are, Connor.
I pray that I will, and that I'll be able to go to these places and see it rekindled.
And you'll have white hair then.
Yes,
you look like Colonel Sanders. It's going to be great.
There'll be somebody like me, but you know, it will just be reversed. There'll be some up and comer that will replace me. Hopefully,
that's what happens.
Indeed, switching places.
No, it's, believe me. You know, we were joking about this, ladies and gentlemen, before we began, but it is the nature of things that, and something many in my generation have never wanted to accept or see. But every generation gets replaced. You know, we come up, we do our bit on the stage, and then the great director takes us off. And that's the nature of things. I am happy to say that as I look around me at so many young people today, and this is true in Ireland, I have a lot of reason for hope. I just wish that I wish we were leaving you better stuff to work with. But I'll leave you with this comforting thought. instead of looking at it as though my generation has messed everything up and you guys are stuck trying to fix it, I want you instead to look at it as though we're leaving you with a series of character building challenges.
Aw, thanks, Charles.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, you've turned this around on us.
See?
You're so generous. You and your generation.
Let me tell you something. It's taken us decades to prepare these wonderful challenges, these tests of skill for you.
You've given us so much, and we have so much to be grateful for.
It's so true. Man, is it true. I mean, I just don't know where to begin and how grateful you guys should be. But you know, it's all right. We've done it all for you.
Well, we have Mark Brown in the comments. He's an Irishman, a converted Catholic. He's living in Ireland. He rekindled his love of Gaelic by learning to pray the rosary in Gaelic. What do you think about that, Charles?
I think that's great. Good on you, Mark. Brown, incidentally, is a very, very famous Irish name out in the area they call Kerry. The reason being that it was the family name of two of the most, well, in the 19th and 20th centuries anyway, two of the most famous Catholic noble families in Ireland. The Browns were the Earls of Kenmare. The other great one, great family of that sort were called Plunkett. And they had two major branches, the Earls of Dunsany. You heard that name? Earl of Dunsany?
I've heard Dunsany, but I feel like I've only heard it in some TV show.
Well, maybe because Lord Dunsany, the Earl of Dunsany, was a fantasy writer, turn of the century, well known.
Really? Oh, that's not where I've heard it, but okay.
All right. Well, anyhow, and then they were Protestants, but their Catholic cousins were the Earls of Fingal. So here's the funny story. There's always a funny story with the Irish. During the penal times, the Irish nobility and gentry, the Catholic nobility, couldn't own land. So usually they went to various subterfuges. Members would turn Protestant, or they'd have Protestant cousins own it for them, or whatever. In the case of the Fingals, well, and sometimes it didn't work. Sometimes they just keep it, but a lot of the time it did work. So the Earls of Dunsany basically took over all the property of the Earls of Fingal, in quotation marks, legally, while the Fingals still continued to run it. Well, it so happened that the build up to emancipation in 1829, the then Earl of Dunsany was a Protestant, but he had a very delicate conscience. And he told his cousin, I sure hope this Catholic Emancipation Bill goes through because my conscience is really bothering me about lying over this. So fortunately for him, it happened, and Fingal was able to legally accept it. Well, unfortunately, the Fingals have died out.
No.
Yeah, it's rather sad. But their Dunsany cousins are now Catholic.
Oh, okay. Well, what's funny is this is the only reason why I know the name is because of Downton Abbey.
Ah, okay.
Well, and I don't know if this is true, but in the show, the Dunsany's house gets burned down by like the IRA or something.
I don't know what Dunsany Castle was, but because it's with us now, but some of them were.
Okay, but the point is that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the houses during the troubles in 1919 to 1924, a lot of great houses were burned down. A lot weren't, and some of them are still in the hands of their owners. But Ray Bradbury wrote a very funny story set during that time called "Terrible Conflagration Up at the Place." And basically what happens, it's some remote area in Ireland. There's an Anglo-Irish earl and his elderly wife living in their great house. And the local people come to them and say, well, We're sorry to tell you this, Your Lordship, but the local IRA have told us that we've got to burn you out. Now, he's actually quite popular, you see. So they say, well, all right, fine, you're going to burn us out. There's nothing I can do about that. However, the artwork in this house really belongs to the people of Ireland. We only hold it in trust. So burn us out all you like, but you're going to have to take these things. So, there are these big nude statues and paintings and so on, and they all get pushed off amongst the people of the neighborhood. A few days go by, and now it's the night that they're supposed to get burned out, and they've been warned so they can leave. But they don't have any relatives in England. They have no money. So they decide they're going to just stay and get consumed with the house when the time comes. But then one of the people comes back and he says, with this big nude painting, it says, well, I'm afraid, Your Lordship, the wife wouldn't have it in the house anymore. She said it was pagan and not to be seen. So he puts it back. And one by one, everybody brings everything back. And finally, they say, there they all are. And the Earl says, well, all right, but we've got the same problem. You burn the house, you burn all these things. And it's a priceless part of the heritage of Ireland. And they all look at each other, and the smoker says, well, I think we'll tell the commandant that we tried, but there was this sudden rainstorm, put out the flame. We took it as a sign from God. So,
okay,
terrible conflagration up at the place. I actually, believe it or not, I know a true story. And I'll leave you with this, I guess, because we must be getting close to time, or are we?
We're past time, but we need to. Well, I need to highlight some things before we go. But finish what you're saying.
All right. Well, in County Monaghan, which is one of the three counties of Ulster that stayed part of the Republic, part of the South, there's a place called Castle Leslie. And it was the home of Sir Sean Leslie, who was a famous Catholic convert and all that. It was Anglo-Irish. His father, Sir John, about 1921, during the Troubles, who was Lord Lieutenant of County Monaghan, which meant he was also in charge of the militia. He was, you remember that from Downton Abbey. During the war, the Earl of Grantham is Lord Lieutenant of the county. So it's the same system throughout the British Isles at that time.
Keeping up morale.
So, yes, and inspecting militia units and things like that. So he's having his breakfast in the morning room there at Castle Leslie, and he looks across the lake, and he sees there's an encampment of armed men, and they're drilling and training and all that. And he thinks, well, right, I'm the Lord Lieutenant of County Monaghan. If anyone's going to be drilling and training, I'll reel them. So he calls the chauffeur. He puts on his uniform. The chauffeur drives him around the lake. They come up. The commandant of the camp salutes him smartly. He reviews the troops. They march past, eyes right. Everything that they're supposed to do. And then he gets back in his car. Commandant salutes him, and off he drives. Well, they found out later that had been the local battalion of the IRA.
Oh my! Charles,
see, that's the side of Ireland I love.
You're full of the hilarious stories. Wonderful. We got Mac in the chat saying, "God bless the Irish and their descendants in the States."
Here. I did the rest of the diaspora.
Yeah, John, not real name. Knowing that God put us here to save the world through evangelization and more makes me scared more than ever. I'm so weak. Well, hold on there, John.
Well, welcome to the club, John.
Yeah, that's like, it's not really singling yourself out with being weak. That's pretty much everybody.
Next, you'll tell us you breathe.
Matthew says, can't wait to read Puritan's Empire, by the way.
Thank you. I hope you'll enjoy it. It was fun to write.
Well, it was fun to read, so you should definitely enjoy it. Yes. So Charles and I will be both at the Blessed Charles Symposium this weekend, this Saturday in Texas. Charles is speaking. Are you excited about that, Charles?
Yeah, it'll be great to be back in Dallas, back in Texas. It'll be good to see old friends and make new ones. It's, you know, I'll tell you a funny thing. Writing is kind of a lonely business. And when you meet people who like your work and when you sign their books, it's a lot of fun. But there's one time when it gets a little tricky. That's when people bring their Kindle for you to sign.
How does that work?
Not well at all.
Are you breaking
You
the glass or something?
Yeah, of course. You sign it, you scratch it across the screen, They'll never forget you.
Matthew, look up the Blessed Charles Symposium online. It's in Plano, Texas. You'll be able to find it.
And I should point out that apart from myself, some of the more illustrious speakers will be His Imperial and Royal Highness, the Archduke Edward von Habsburg, the Hungarian Ambassador to the Holy See, his son, His Imperial and Royal Highness Paul von Habsburg, their cousin, Anna Maria, née Archduchess of Austria, but now Princess Galitzin. She married a Russian prince. So she's still a highness, you see, you can't escape it. And Suzanne Pearson, who's the head of the Gebetsliga in the United States, will be there, the League of Prayer for Emperor Karl. I'm missing some people. I think the abbot of Clear Creek will be there. And then, of course, David Ross is the impresario putting the whole thing together. So it should be a good time. You'll see, if you come, you'll see a lot of other devotees of either or both Blessed Emperor Karl, Servant of God, Empress Zita. And it should be a good time. It should be a very good time. And I think that more now than ever, we need their intercession. Everything I said earlier about our leadership class. Well, particularly pray to the emperor and his consort for our well-being and our protection and the growth of the faith and everything else, because Lord knows they put up with worse than we have, and very often at the hands of the same kind of people.
Yeah, indeed. Well, before we go, I just want to ask the listeners and viewers a favor, especially the ones in the chat. I know many of you have, typed in comments in the chat, in the live chat, but it'd be really helpful for the channel if you could also put a comment in the below the description in the comment section, because that will get the video to more people. And please make sure you like and share and subscribe. If you enjoyed this episode, which I think I did very much so, and Charles, did you enjoy the episode?
Well, I did, but you know what I just did? I didn't have comments turned on. Can you imagine? All I had was private chat, and for some reason nothing showed up. Well, thank you, Stephen Bisset, Jack, John Not Real Name. John Not Real Name has an awful lot of really good stuff here, as does Matthew Parlato. I'm really amazed. Fina Koi. Yeah. John Not Real Name asked this. He says, Ira is contemplating euthanasia. Please ask Mr. Coulombe how democracies who introduce literal murder can still claim to be safe or kill less people than absolute monarchies. Oh, because they're their father, the devil, who was a liar from the beginning. It's an easy answer. He mentions the Irish Civil War. Both parties meant to be Christian democratic. Well, they're meant to be Christian democratic, and they're neither one. But that's very standard for Western Europe, not to worry. Now there's he also says, these are all, I've got to bring them in because if I've been wrong on points, I certainly don't mind having this brought out. Michael Collins was in the Irish Republican Brotherhood. Dev didn't like that, although they were friendly before the treaty split. Treaty debates were not revolved around partition. Ireland as a separate kingdom would have been the best solution. Theoretically, it would have been possible. I agree. So did Daniel O'Connell. Dev only took the oath, and this is another good one, because the law came in, because the IRA murdered a cabinet official, I think, to require one to take the oath. Actually, I have to tell you there, John, it was part of the thing from the beginning. The very fact that it was to be like Canada, you had to take the oath to sit in office in the very beginning. But this is an interesting thing. Dev asked a priest, the Irish priesthood in recent times have always shown us a lot of things, if he could take an oath without meaning it. And the priest said, no, but you can take it and say it was not taken sincerely, which Dev did, and he was allowed in Parliament. It is funny. No, it's not. That priest's nephews grew up to take Ireland through Vatican II. Great going, guys. And see, that is exactly, and there's something important here, though. That is what is called casuistry. Now, mind you, there's a certain usefulness to casuistry. I don't want to just knock it out. But that's exactly the kind of thing the Ulster Scots would jump on as proof that Catholics can't be trusted. Right there. Exactly that kind of thing. I hate to tell another story, but I can't help it.
Another one? Just kidding.
Yeah, okay. I know. Story time with Uncle Charles.
The best time of the year.
Old-time memories of an old-time boomer.
Well, you're not like Joe Biden, where they just become like Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Well, there was that. And also, I can remember how that they do end eventually, which he doesn't always. But no, seriously, I had this particular discussion some years ago, in fact, back in '93, with a very good Irish Catholic judge in, he wasn't a judge then, but he was a QC, Queen's Counsel, which is a senior barrister. It means that they can argue the law in the Commonwealth King's Council, I have to say now. They can argue the law in higher courts. In Ireland, they call them senior counsel. And in certain dominions, like parts of Australia, where they want to pretend they don't have a monarchy, instead they want to pretend they have a republic like Ireland. But at any rate, the thing was that the QC in question, again, a good friend of mine, a really devout Catholic, a very good man. Nevertheless, we were arguing, he was a Republican, and we were arguing over this. And I said, look, all of your politicians and your judges and all the rest of the riffraff, they all take oaths to the king and his successors. I said to the Queen, because that's who we had at the time. They all take oaths to the Queen and to bear a true and faithful allegiance. Now, if you take that oath and you mean to break it, in my country, we take an oath to the Constitution. You take that and you mean to break it, well, you're considered a perjurer and a traitor. There's just no way around that. And he proceeded to give me a long explanation as to how what the oath appeared to seem to mean. Maybe that is to say, and he was going on and on and on. And I swear to you, I'm not the stupidest person alive, but I could not follow it. And finally, my eyes were turning up in my head as he went on and on. And when he finished, I said, John, now bear in mind, he's Irish. Here's the problem. I'm just a stupid French Canuck. With us, you take an oath, you keep it, or you die trying. I don't have this fine Anglo-Saxon mind of yours. that can turn these things backwards and forwards. I can't do that. However, I hope that one day I'm summoned by the opposing side in a court case that you're in. And when the time comes to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, I'll look you in the eye and I'll tell my truth. I'll tell the truth the way it should be, the way it would be if we lived in a better world. And I know you won't mind because of your elastic view of oaths. Well, for some reason, he didn't want to talk about it any further. But I just have to say that oath thing with Dev, that really, and I'd not heard that before, by the way, John, and I don't doubt you in the slightest. It tells you as much about the state of the clergy in Ireland in that time as anything else. Anyway, and yeah, he's not strictly a Republican, but can't have everything. Let me see.
Charles, I think we should.
Well,
I think we should wrap it up.
Yeah, I guess we got to. But I got to thank you all. This has been a lot of fun. So there you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Charles, for coming on the show. Anything else coming up? Any other events that you'll be at?
Events that I'll be at. That's a scary thought. Other than next weekend, no.
Okay. Well,
I've got right now my plans are very much up in the air, except that you can usually catch me on Mondays at my own podcast, Off the Menu, which you'll find at the Tumblar House, YouTube channel, TUMBLAR HOUSE, Tumblar House. And as far as any personal appearances, nothing scheduled after next weekend.
Okay. Well, you can also check out Charles on old episodes. I've had Charles on plot lines, so go check that out. Should be a playlist in link, which I think I might have to update it, but it's got a good amount of videos. But yeah, so thank you everyone for watching. And make sure, again, if you're in the live chat and if you watch this later, please leave a comment in the comment section. It will help the channel grow a lot. And, I'm putting this work in, and I just hope you guys do your part. Thank you, everyone, and God bless. Bye.